He vowed to expel corruption in the country with the help of Congressman Eddie Villanueva. Another presidential bet, Isko Moreno visited Dagupan in Pangasinan, where he got the support of a former mayor. In his speech, Moreno reiterated his plans to cut taxes on petroleum products and power services.
Presidential aspirant and Senator Ping Lacson claims that the demolition job against him is being organized by a group supporting another candidate.
May nasasaktan doon sa ubusin ng magnanakaw. That's a general statement. Wala akong pinatutungkulan kung sino man yung tatamaan. Ngayon kung nasasaktan sila, baka magnanakaw sila.
Tonight, we will conduct another interview with a candidate aspiring for a seat in the Senate. What are his plans and platforms, and how will he act on his intentions for a better Philippines? We discuss in this episode of Face the Chiefs. Welcome to this edition of The Chiefs. I'm Nuchi Cruz Valdez, and also with us is Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. Hello, Ami. Anong balita ngayon? Ikaw ang may latest dyan?
Oo nga, well, changes lang. Si Roy Shimato has resigned for reasons from Department of Environment, and we have a new commission chairman. Dating Davao accountant. Kaya lang galing din naman siya sa COA. Mahaba na rin yung experience na ron. So,
right. So, ang daming palitan, no? At may arestong naganap, di ba? Si Dr. Nati De Castro, inaresto raw, no? On charges of being chairman of the CPP-NPA, or at least being the medical officer. So, yan ang mga abangan natin in the coming weekend. But for now, wag na tayo mag-aksaya ng panahon. We are joined tonight by former Defense Secretary Gilbert Gibo Teodoro, who is running for senator under the BBM Sara Unit Team slate. Good evening, sir, and welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ma'am Luchi and Ma'am Ami.
Nako, minamam pa kami.
Kayo nga dapat niyo ako. Sinasir niyo ako.
So, okay, you ran for president the last time we saw you in public, and now you're running for a Senate seat. May diferensya ba? How are the campaigns now compared to the campaign as a presidential?
May big difference, no, yung campaign before, because I was running for president. I had the pick of scheduling, and you were center stage. Right now, the campaign for senator is more hectic, actually, because of the tight scheduling. And you have to realize your role as part of a team and as a supporting person. Of course, your individual characteristics and individual plans should come out. But then again, you want to congeal your plans homogeneously with, as far as possible, with that of your president and vice president.
Right. I want to ask you, ito na ha. You know, the last we heard of you before you filed for your candidacy was when you went to Davao, and you were in effect lobbying to be the running mate of Sara Duterte, who at that time everybody thought was going to run for president. Now, I want to ask you how you feel about the turn of events with her now running for president instead.
Well, I think it's the best possible decision that they made to unite, and I'm glad to be part of it. And I'll do my best to support BBM and Sara in this endeavor. Of course, before the choices were made, there was political lobbying and jockeying for positioning, no? But at the end of the day, a decision was made, and we respect that decision.
But
And we
as far
support
as
it.
you knew, yeah, as far as you knew, was she really gunning for just vice president? As far as you knew.
I really can't say because we really didn't directly talk about it. Other people were trying to negotiate those terms on our behalf. And I really cannot answer with certainty what her intentions were at that time.
Mr. Chodora, you have a nearly full slate, ano? Can
Yes.
you talk more about campaigning with a large group? Kasi from the surveys, we're seeing na yung may name recall ngayon na yung mga kilala na, mga
Oo.
senators and of course media personalities, si Rafi Tulfo, no? A person like you who has been out of the picture for a long time, how are you coping with this? How are you increasing your name recall? Of course, the exposure with Sara and Bongbong helps, pero that's a big group, that's a big crowd out there, di ba? How do you shine?
Well, I mean, you try to connect as much as possible with the crowd in personal appearances, and knowing that you have to do it within a limited period of time. Because the number one, of course, as I said, you're a supporting actor, and number two is also the attention span of the crowd, no? So you'll have to make key points, more particularly showing your knowledge of the intricacies of the area. It's fortunate to be in the Ilocos region, which from the north, I consider my district, the first district of Tarlac, the gateway to the north, no? Because we speak the same language. And fortunately, I was able to connect. And I intend to do this in the other regions where I have familiarity and I have retained a lot of political friendships and other business friendships and the like. But that being said, I realize that name recall is really important, and to counteract this, there is really should be a strategy of more exposure and just more hard work to explain yourself to the people and to make yourself known.
You're also campaigning with the restrictions, health restrictions imposed by the COMELEC in consultation with the Department of Health. There's been some controversy over these rules. Kayo po, anong tingin nyo? Gusto nyo rin bang ibalik yung hugging, kissing, selfies, all the candidates?
Yung hugging, yung kissing talagang hindi naman ginagawa. Mahirap yon. Mahirap yun. Ngayon, medyo mahirap yan, ano? Nung araw, pwede pa siguro. Pero yung selfie, hindi mo mapapara talaga kahit na anong gawin mo. Kaya the COMELEC should be reasonable also on this. You know, I have always been an advocate really of strong political parties, established and sustainable political parties, which means authorized funding sources for the political parties, not only in elections, but to be able to churn out policies and programs. Now, for example, the spending limits, assuming you have a strong political party, you want to put somebody who's deserving but he has no money into office, the spending limits, which are equal for everybody, egalitarian, don't work. I mean, it will work
So
to the advantage of...
Why?
It should be not capped, but the expenses must be disclosed. So, and then you allow political parties to have sources of funding, let's say from business, from other sources, but they must disclose. Because media, for example, at the end of the day, it's the bottom line in terms of the profit and loss sheet and the income statement. The same with the political party. If you have weak political party structures, basically by COMELEC rules and laws, basically by the egalitarianism of the COMELEC, then you won't have political party loyalty. Secondly, they will only crop up when there are elections. Political parties should be think tanks. They should be able to tap, let's say, you want to file a bill or something. You have your staff, of course, in Senate, but in the political parties, they should provide the research based on the party principles. But they won't be able to do this if you cannot sustain them.
Well, that's why many people are saying this is what In fact, we should have done this a long time ago. And now, more than ever, we're seeing that the political party system is just so weak. It's virtually non-existent. I mean, look at all of you running for senator. Ang daming sharing of candidates. Diba? Ang daming candidates na you don't know what they stand for. As a matter of fact, sila Ping Lacson have dropped a few senatorial candidates from their slate because nga nagpuntahan sa ibang campaign, and endorsed other presidents. So what are you going to do if you do get voted? What should we do in order to restore, if we ever had one, at least to re-strengthen the party system?
First and foremost, the party system is, there were attempts to strengthen the political party system here by banning, let's say, turncoatism, etc. But why is there turncoatism? Because you don't get support from one party and you look for support from another. But if political parties are capacitated to support their slates, then there will be loyalty and now no turncoatism. I mean, the problem is the law here is so puritanical and egalitarian in terms of sustainability of political parties. The effect then is political turncoatism, no established political parties. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, the saying, as I had a talk earlier with the integrated bar of the Cebu City chapter about the Public Service Act and my thoughts about it. I didn't see the final version though, because if you search in the internet, you can't see the final version. The road to the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Egalitarianism sometimes in the law won't work if you put your feet on the ground and see the practical realities. No? Now the COMELEC is also
Do you think these parties should be subsidized? Because may ganyan mga suggestion eh.
Yes.
Dapat na i-subsidize ng gobyerno, di ba?
Hindi. Subsidy ng gobyerno in other countries is subject to counterpart funding also.
So parang may share, parang ganon.
May share. Yung marginalized parties, for example, yung funding sources nila maliit, isa-subsidize yun. But the more important thing is talaga, you have sunshine laws, no? Saan ka kumukuha ng kontribusyon? Saan ka kumukuha ng donasyon? And gawing tax deductible yung mga donasyon sa political parties, because then you're investing in political institutions of your choice, of your color. Pero i-disclose ng kumpanya man or ano, no? At kung kumpanya ito, siguraduhin lang na hindi ito foreign company, no?
Mr. Toro, you're talking about electoral and campaign finance reforms. I remember panahon pa ni Speaker Joe De Venecia, he's been pushing for these laws already. Kaya lang, there has always been resistance from, certain persons na as gusto nila, opaque yung campaign finance. If you win, are you going to, dapat second gap pa to, ba tatanungin ko na rin. If you win, are you going to push for these reforms, campaign finance, electoral reforms? Sabi ng COMELEC, they already have suggestions with Congress kung paano dapat gawin.
Yes, but if it comes from the regulator itself, based on my experience in the private sectors, because normally, for example, the SEC, the BSP, and other agencies, they submit draft regulations for comments. I hope the COMELEC does that too, no? Because coming from a regulator, sometimes it's also influenced by other societies, no? Like our model of what a good government is the Scandinavian democracies, no? And it's really egalitarian, but it won't work in our country because the systems are totally different. So I am for campaign finance reform, but what is the meaning of reform? Me, it's a big dose of realism into Philippine political conditions as to how these parties can flourish and be established. Because if not, then it will also affect the quality of governance in the future, at least on the elective side. Now, to balance this also, although we have to pick at specific agencies, we can't have a wholesale
Subsidy.
Across the board. I was going to talk about the bureaucracy. To counteract the political side, you need a strong bureaucracy, which is often forgotten or even not realized by the voting public now. Because if you talk about politics, the first thing that they think of is sinong iboboto ko. But the continuum and the information should come from the bureaucracy before they present it to the elected decision maker, so that theoretically, at least, the decision maker acts with all available information. So on the same side, you have political party reform, you should have bureaucratic reform also. And you really have to free some agencies of the bureaucracy, knowing that they should compete, that they compete for human capital resources with the private sector. And it will benefit the government if you can hire or even outsource some specialized skills, without the restrictions of the procurement law, particularly in IT and even in health. Vaccine companies, if they spend billions of dollars in research, they're going to require you to sign an NDA. And you're at the mercy of the supplier. If not, you're not going to get it. So the ability also of the government to invest in emerging and disruptive technologies. The government should set aside some capital as risk capital for investments in these ventures, or even provide incentives for R&D to our private sector and schools, or participate in R&D at the source, wherever this may be. Because in disruptive and emerging technologies, particularly in the information security field, you have to be a co-partner of the development, because if you're going to buy off-the-shelf solutions, then it's too late. You're going to be
let me ask you: is this proposal of yours something that the very let's just say vested interest-run politicians in Congress will support? This is something that
I think so, because it makes sense. It makes sense to me. I mean, the institutionalization of a political party which is there to serve their needs legitimately, and with sunlight, I think it will be something that they will support rather than proscriptions against certain behavior. Because I'm a great believer of giving incentives for good behavior rather than just punishment of or prescribing what we deem abhorrent.
Okay, moving on, since you were talking about vaccines, what would be your economic recovery plan, especially in light of the pandemic that we're just getting out of? And I hope nagsasalitang anghel ako that we're really getting out of it. But
yes,
of course, it's leaving us with an economy that's been terribly, terribly ransacked by the situation. What's your recovery plan?
The recovery plan, first and foremost, Luchi, and I'm telling the people this, you can't file bills to help things despite good intentions. I'll give you an example. The Agri-Agra law. Banks just find it cheaper to pay the fine rather than to comply with the Agri-Agra law. And sometimes, let's say the big unibanks have a problem also because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the BSP frowns on having agricultural land as collateral. So this is just an example of a special law which had good intentions but contemporarily cannot be implemented.
Okay.
So that being said, the first recovery document or vehicle that we participate in should be the National Expenditure Program of the new government. And when that is submitted, as senators, when it comes to us, we review it and we view where the money is going to go to, what stimulus packages are going to go in, because that will be part of the NEP, certainly, of the next government, and there you flow from there. You provide synergistic legislation, if necessary, But if you file special laws to give incentives in a discoordinated manner, what will happen is like what happened to locators and investors when they were promised this rate, but because of government necessities, the rate was increased. So the first thing is to study the national expenditure plan and to give your comments and insights as to what sectors would need more help than others. And secondly, I will also
GAA and the budget
talaga.
in effect.
GAA talaga. Yan talaga ang punot dulo ng lahat ng recovery programs ng gobyerno. Secondly, if we go back to normal, kasi wala na yung Bayanihan 1, Bayanihan 2, at magbukas na yung health, maraming reserve capital ang private sector na they are willing and ready to deploy. But they cannot deploy it now because of the uncertainty of the pandemic. Having come from the private sector, I'm certain of that. I mean, once they are free and able to open up, particularly in consumer consumption fields,
Consumer spending, yes.
Consumer spending, yung mga malls, everything, retail, bumukas, gagana uli, tutulong na rin na gumana yung ekonomiya. Pero of course, the government will be the catalyst of this, no? Thirdly, Lucy, in that GAA, we'll make sure that adequate funds are downloaded subject to performance governance standards to the local governments to capacitate them. Particularly in building healthcare facilities, because that is the problem. Actually, it's the overflow of bed capacity in hospitals. Secondly, we expect the participative democracy from the barangays. From the barangay level, right? It's the community that you're in. But we don't adequately give incentives to barangay officials. They're subject to so many responsibilities, taking risks without even simple benefits from the government. There are some, but not enough. I'll give an example of a barangay secretary. They certify public documents, minutes, certifications, etc. If there's something wrong with that, they can be prosecuted for falsification of public documents, Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. But do they have insurance? Do they get adequate
Sweldo nila.
Wala eh. Wala.
Sure,
Honorarium lang eh. Meron ng batas
Yeah.
para dyan. Kaso talagang yung financial capacity, kaya kailangan i-redirect mo. Lalo-lalo na when you see, pag nakita mo, may mga retentions ang national government agencies dahil hindi na lang magastos. Sana di-download na lang sa mga probinsya at saka mga municipalities. Subject to PGS, performance governance standards, nakakayanin lang gastusin ng tama.
Sige sir, maraming tanong, lalo na si Ami. Nakareserva na. But we'll be back. We'll just pause for a break. We'll be back. Stay with us. All right, tonight we continue with our conversation, Ami, okay, with aspirants for the coming elections. And let's find out the plans of the candidates as they face the chiefs. All right, and we're with Gibo, Gilbert Teodoro. Actually, baligtad. You're more known as Gibo. But your father was Gilbert Teodoro. But
Gilberto,
at this point,
actually,
I will...
Gilberto, with an O.
Gilberto
Gilberto.
Teodoro. Yeah? 30 years, SSS, Tagala. Anyway,
20.
during the time of Marcos. 20 lang
Yes.
ba? 66 to 86, true.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Ami, your turn.
Well, since we'll be asking you questions that we ask other candidates for the
Of
Senate.
course.
Tatanungin ko yung isa na hindi namin naitanong sa iba because you are a former defense chief and
Yes.
your vice presidential candidate is proposing military conscription. Ano po yung stand nyo din doon sa controversial suggestion na yun?
Sa akin, I support some form of compulsory national service. But before we do that, we have to first review the structure of the armed forces reserve force. If it can accommodate and has the facilities to house, train, and equip these reserve forces. So it's a good idea, but there is a limit. And it has to be properly thought out so that the armed forces can properly accept people for compulsory service. Now, that's the right hand. The left hand is also equally important. That's called civil defense. Emergency responders, fire, disaster risk reduction experts, the young can also participate in national service on that, because in every conflict or crisis, there's the right hand and the left hand. And being defense chief, you feel that, especially since before, when you're not in the chain of command in the armed forces, but you are the head. I was the head formerly of the NDCC, now NDRRMC. So there you get to feel the needs, the balance. For example, there is a conflict that's on the military side. That is one aspect. You ensure the lowest number of casualties. If it is a police operation, the proper coordination between the police and the armed forces. And on the left-hand side, if there are displaced people, if there are people injured in that conflict, then you have to care for them. So that's the civil defense side. And there are more natural calamities that occur in every place of the Philippines once every year at least, where that's capacity building on the part of the LGUs, and then the military help also in case they are overwhelmed. So there's a left hand and the right hand. So civil defense plus military, you can combine these two into a national service like the Singaporean model. They can even join for mandatory national service their police force, because once, let's say, there's a conflict, your civil defense is ready, your military force goes to the front, or they are conscripted for some form of duty. You have, and some policemen are actually reserve soldiers. You have to have somebody to fill the gap. No?
But wouldn't it be enough yung mandatory ROTC, which is what President Duterte is pushing for? Kasi si Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana, sabi niya, we cannot afford military service for all these 19-year-olds. Sabi niya, and we are not on war footing, sabi niya. And he is also in favor of mandatory ROTC lang.
Ang ROTC sa akin, look, that's an acronym, right?
Yes.
The acronym is Reserve Officers Training Course. So you're training officers because college graduates itong mga to eh. How about the meat of the core, ang mga enlisted personnel? May iba na hindi makakapunta sa college. Paano yun? So, hindi lahat pwede maging opisyal. Ang problema, pag ina-ROTC mo lahat ng mga estudyante, meron magiging officers dyan yung nag-advance ROTC, pero hindi lahat. At pag college graduate ka, may resistance sa ating kultura na hindi ka maging opisyal. Kasi may titulo ka eh, may degree ka eh. So yun ang problema doon sa ROTC. Kaya nga, pinupush ko nung araw na voluntary ROTC with scholarships para may inganyo rather than mandatory. Kasi I explained myself, Reserve Officer Training Corps, pero hindi pwedeng 1,000 chiefs and only 3 followers. Di ba? May
you're
force
in
structure yan eh.
So you're in favor of compulsory military service?
No, compulsory national service.
National
Kasi ang
not necessarily
yes,
military.
not necessarily military kasi I explained myself earlier, may limit ang kakayahan ng armed forces. Even the reserve force structure, may limit yan. Actually, when I was still in the defense seat, I was always questioning the reserve force structures because in the three reserve forces, for example, I was questioning before the structure of the Air Force. The reserve force of the Air Force should be complementary to its main mission, which is the air defense of the Philippines, and not a replication of the Philippine Army Reserve Forces being ground troops. So the force structure, which is it's a management process, and we have what we call a defense system of management process in the Department of National Defense, in collaboration with the armed forces, should come out with the force structure through the process which is sustainable and which is optimal for our country. I think the intention is to put them under a disciplined environment for some form of time where they earn the values of service to the country. This can be done on a sustainable basis by the left hand and the right hand, civil defense and military. But each has its limits.
Okay.
Since we're talking about war and military service, may I ask you about your stand on the West Philippine Sea and how you think it ought to be handled in order to finally define what the relationship should be with China?
That's very complex because relations between countries are multidimensional. I mean, even the United States has to talk to China once in a while because of the economic side of things. Now, in our case, we have the law on our side, UNCLOS, and the arbitral ruling somewhat strengthens this by saying that the basis for exclusive rights, etc., is UNCLOS and historic, quote unquote, historic occupation cannot trump UNCLOS, but it did not rule on our territorial claims. So on that, we have that to back up. It has already been stated by the president that it cannot be taken away by passage of time, etc. Now, how do you enforce it?
But yes, exactly.
That is the
and
problem.
how do you drive off China, from our shores? I mean, right now we're having a hard time driving them off our territorial sea. So, how do you drive them off?
Actually, territorial sea, maybe not. It's the EEZ which we have a problem. No, the territorial sea, it's subject to contention also based on the regime of islands theory. No, for us it is clear, but for other countries it is not so clear. Now, because the most undemocratic institution in the world, although they mouth off words like democracy, is the United Nations because of the veto power of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, China being one, then we have to probably raise moral suasion by voices from other countries in order to support us, to give enough traction for China to back off. That is the realistic solution. Now, the challenge is to find why will these countries side with us? What is there for these countries to side with us in the face of their own bilateral relations with China, which may be very substantial?
Right.
We have to find that. How do we find it? And this I intend to do. After studying it very carefully in the future, I intend to increase the capacities in human capital of the Department of National Defense and the Department of Foreign Affairs. We need more experts and research-based experts, and more support for our diplomatic service in connection with the Department of National Defense. Look, I'll tell you, the Department
So you have
of
leverage.
National... No, so that you can rely on the diplomats
Right.
to do what they are supposed to
The
do.
negotiating. Right. Yeah.
Negotiating not with China, perhaps, but with other countries to make alliances which are good for us.
Mhm.
Now, if you saddle our Department of Foreign Affairs with low funding, thinking that our embassies abroad, for example, are extravagances, then you won't be able to get that kind of leverage. You know, diplomats have to have the freedom to network with their counterparts. Our embassies should be showcases of this country in terms of tourism. And you can't skimp on that. It is the best advertisement that you can give for the Philippines. There should be one-stop shops for investors where the one-stop shop officer up to the local government should prepare everything already, so the investor doesn't need to come back and forth, get permits and requirements from this or that agency. And that is only done by capacitating the Department of Foreign Affairs. Now, in the Department of National Defense, which also has the mandate of doing strategic research, how can you do that if you're under the civil service? You cannot. You have to get out so you can have a core of professionals, historians, international relations people, planners to think and to provide the policy substance. But look at the situation. Armed forces with the retirees have probably about almost 400,000 with the retirees. You have the PVAO, you have the government arsenal, you have Veterans Memorial Medical Center, and you have the Office of Civil Defense. Very, very broad. You know, the regular plantilla of the Department of National Defense is less than 500 people. How can you provide the services for your quote-unquote clients with 500 people only? What is happening is we are seconding people from the armed forces and other agencies to the department. But in that sense, it does not build the institution. So that is one thing that I admit I failed to do in my stint because of the different crises that needed to be attended to. But building the organization itself is something that I intend to help with and do once I'm in the Senate.
Okay, still on
Complementary yan, DND, DFA.
Still on foreign issues, if you are elected to the Senate, the next Congress will be expected to tackle the possibility of the country returning to the ICC, the Rome Statute. Will you vote for it?
No, I have always been against, on the record to make it clear, because my opinion as a Secretary of National Defense was asked, and predecessor opinions during the time that was being discussed. And we oppose it in the Department of National Defense because conditions, local insurgency conditions are different worldwide. And you cannot have a foreigner judging you on what is right or wrong. No? And even in the application of the ICC statutes, those that are strong won't ever get prosecuted. Like there were claims of British and American abuses in Afghanistan brought to the ICC. They dismissed it on the ground that the local, the domestic institutions for prosecution and or judging were sufficient. So why don't we get to the level where our local institutions are capacitated? For example, there are many salas of the courts which do not have judges. So they use pairing judges. The National Prosecution Service, they lack officers because you cannot attract lawyers to the service or even specialists because of the standardized pay rates. And even the PAO, it doesn't have enough resources.
Okay. So
look at
are
your
you
own backyard
saying,
first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So are you saying then that there is no basis and that there's sufficient justice being served, for example, in the drug war? It's justice being
I'm not
served
saying that.
here, and yeah.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that we should work on this first than have somebody else wash our dirty laundry in public.
But you told us you opposed our accession
Yes.
from statute.
Yes. I did. The DND as an institution opposed it before we acceded to it.
Yes. And if they ask in the next Congress, in the next administration, if the ICC asks the Philippines to come here to investigate the war on drugs of the Duterte administration, will you express opposition to it?
To me, as a matter of principle, yes. But then it's moot and academic anyway, because the Supreme Court said that, you know, the what do you call this? The detachment or the withdrawal from the ICC statute is not retroactive. So it's moot and academic.
No, I mean, will you? Are you open to allowing ICC investigators to come to the Philippines?
Well, they can come here, but as far as the legal effect is, then I'll have to see where they operate and what bounds they operate in. Because I mean, this is a national issue that should refocus on us strengthening our institutions.
Mm-hmm.
With the ICC, it's a cop-out in that sense that you're outsourcing to a foreigner what you should be doing yourself. So where does that leave us?
But you admit that there's a lapse in justice here at home. That's
Yes,
probably
there is.
inviting international criticism.
Yeah, but it will invite international attention here because we are a developing country. There are also justice issues like the BLM, etc. in other countries, but it doesn't invite ICC attention.
Okay. What are your views on the way the war on drugs has been carried out since 2016? Because we asked Senator Ronald De La Rosa, and he said one mistake he will admit is that he implemented it without carrying out a thorough cleansing first of the PNP. What do you think of that?
Oh, okay. First and foremost, war against drugs is extremely difficult because of the vast amount of money that these drug lords have. So how you approach that, I do not have the answer, because even in the United States, they try to build a wall already, you know. So it's extremely difficult. Number two, it also makes us focus on our own intelligence and police forces, no, in their capacities to have intelligence-based and evidence-supported operations. Because the end in view of any operation should be to gather enough evidence in order to convict. So you need to capacitate both the PNP and the National Prosecution Service for this. It happened before. I remember one of the first big drug labs in Pasig was raided. That was during the time of President Arroyo, the Boratong case in Pasig. There were 4 lady prosecutors assigned to that. And we were asked by the president to provide security for these 4 prosecutors who allegedly were going to be offered some sums in exchange for a non-prosecution. But these lady prosecutors stood firm, and there was a conviction here. And I think he's still in jail, or the cohorts are still in jail. So we have to continue on a sustainable basis this kind of activities. And secondly, more importantly, there should be a fusion between what the PIDEA does and the police do. We see instances of missed encounters because of conflicting jurisdictions, no? I think this has to be threshed out. Initially, I'll expect them to thresh it out by way of a coordinating mechanism for them. But if not, then we may have to introduce a mandatory legislation.
Sir.
In terms of the police, in terms of the police, it's high time also we review Republic Act 8551 as amended, which makes the armed forces of the Philippines the primary guarantor of internal security. I think we have to have a sunset provision on that law already and build the capacity of the police for several tasks that the armed forces is doing at the present time.
You think restoring capital punishment would help? Would you support?
No. I have always been against the death penalty. I mean, not for any moral reason. I feel that it is acceptable, but you must have the mechanism to guarantee a fair trial. A fair trial does not mean that you have a POW lawyer there. You have to capacitate the POW lawyer to have the means to gather evidence in behalf of the accused, which costs a lot of money. And so there is the specter of people, particularly in a highly popular case, highly popular and controversial case. There's a specter of a person being wrongly convicted. And once he's dead, you cannot put him back to life or her back to life anymore.
Okay, sir, let me ask you about this. This involves the Unity Team's presidential candidate, Bongbong Marcos. In your last sortie with the Unity Team in Ilocos, no, you made mention of the vision of a new society that you feel should be brought back. And of course, you know, the mention of new society.
Lucy, may I correct it? Yeah. I said that President Marcos in 1972 had a vision of a new society. Now a new society is not enough. We need to rebuild or re-engineer with science, political science and engineering, geohazard, a new country for the future. Because our political structures, our local government capacities, our functional groupings, even our regions may not be what is appropriate to compete in a post-pandemic world where countries are bringing up barriers rather than holding hands. But the ultimate beneficiary of this are the youth. And their aspirations should be taken into account. That I didn't say that we should bring back the new society. What I said is during his father's time, there was a new society, but my exposition of Bagong Pilipinas para sa bagong henerasyon, which is an evolving process, was embraced by President Marcos. Now, how that plays up, by Senator Marcos, rather. That was a Freudian slip.
Okay, but semantic. Siguro the semantics of new society. You admit that it evokes painful memories, no, for many people.
Some, yes. To some, yes. But it happened. Post EDSA, it also evokes painful memories for some. And EDSA promised a better life for everybody. But what happened? EDSA DOS promised if Estrada were removed, of course, in the short term, because exchange rates were really going sky high, the markets were falling, investor confidence left. But then you promise a better future after political constitutional shortcuts. To me, that is the lesson. You can't have constitutional shortcuts. You must strengthen your institutions. Firstly, if your institutions are not capable of being followed, then you have to review it.
Well, there's another.
That's what I was saying. Yung bagong Pilipinas para sa bagong henerasyon. The new society is past. That's passé.
Well, there's another problem, and that's endemic corruption. And your standard there
Sure.
are bounded by corruption issues. What's your comment about all these charges that he is rewriting history, revisionist history?
Well, didn't we rewrite history after EDSA? We did. Textbooks will prove. And you know, I saw also some civics textbooks na sino si ganito ganito, naming a past political figure, one trying to be cutesy. I mean, probably everyone tries to expound on his or herself to bring out the best, no? But everybody probably, we know, even EDSA tried to rewrite history, and history will only be known, the truth of the betterment or worse conditions will only be known after a passage of time, when people have had the objectivity already necessary to review a particular political epoch or era in our political development. I was talking to Francis Fukuyama personally years ago, and he said that constitutional shortcuts will not help this country. And then he said, but don't worry, you're still a young country. The British were killing each other for more than 800 years before they had constitutionalism. And we see what's happening in Europe and the Western countries now. So it's not only a Philippine problem, but it's worldwide, particularly in the information age. No, so my stand is to build our institutions in a way which is realistic and a way which will promote our country's development, keeping into account our own values and our own quirks as a multi-ethnic, multilinguistic, multi-free society, no?
But what do? You just gloss over the hidden wealth, for example, of the Marcoses.
Well, there are processes for that. I mean, I was lawyering for several of those charged with the hidden wealth, and just to get from step 1 to step 2, because there was evidence in some of the cases, but for 30 years, if the prosecution did its job, there was credible evidence, then somebody had to go to jail. But they did. And you know, to substitute.
But the fact that some money has been recovered, definitely not all, but the fact that there was substantial money already recovered proves that there was theft and there was corruption. What do we do with that? Should we gloss over that, especially if...
But what is the connection of the candidate himself or herself to this? What is the extent of his participation in these mechanisms? They haven't been able to prove it.
Yes, but...
and now, these issues are being raised when there's an election, so let the people be the judge.
But the fear is all of these investigations and prosecutorial processes will come to a halt if he becomes president.
But there were 30 years of that. During the time of President Aquino, President Ramos, this never stopped. And then President Arroyo. The PCGG was there for the longest period of time, but no conviction has been gotten by them. They even seconded prosecutors.
But
with Sandigan justices who were appointed by President Aquino, but saw through the fairness of the processes. And they could have fast-tracked the cases, but they did not on constitutional grounds. I was there because I was an assistant to Estelito Mendoza.
But how to explain the fact that we have recovered billions in legally declared ill-gotten wealth, but we haven't convicted a single person who did the...
Well, that's the fault of the prosecution. I was a defense lawyer the whole time. We did our job. They should do theirs.
Okay. Unfortunately...
All right. Very interesting.
Yeah. We've run out of time. And
Vox Populi, Vox Dei now. They should have raised these issues long ago.
Okay. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Mr. Gilbert Chodoro, running
Thank you.
Senate. Thank you very much for appearing on the CHIEFS. And
thank you, Ma'am Lucy and Ma'am Annie.
Okay.
Ma'am, okay. Salamat. Good night. Thank you very much. All right. And that will be all for this edition of the CHIEFS. But what we hope, what was discussed here, will keep the conversation going. I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez.
I look forward to another episode with you on other issues.
Yes.
Continue the
All
conversation.
right.
Or maybe I can become a panelist also of the chief, so I get to ask the questions.
But you'll be in the Senate, okay? So maybe. All right, Ami? Yeah.
Okay. Well, before we go, a reminder to our viewers: mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
And I'm Luchi Cruz Valdez, and we are One News.